A long time ago, a brutal war erupted between the Orthodox Alliance and the demonic cult, swallowing the Jianghu in chaos where anyone who picked up a sword was destined to die. And what should have been a decisive battle stretched into a 30-year nightmare filled with bloodshed, grief, and endless suffering, until it suddenly ended one day through a mysterious truce that no one could explain, a secret. Both sides chose to bury even after decades passed. As the world slowly rebuilt, new powers began to rise while once great families weakened. And among them was Jianghu, the second daughter of the righteous sword sect, who struggled desperately to break through her limits and master the red death sword art in order to restore her family's former glory. Yet no matter how hard she trained, her progress remained stagnant, and just as frustration began to consume her, news arrived that she had been invited to participate in the prestigious Dragon and Phoenix tournament, one of the two greatest martial competitions in the land, held alongside the deadly Heavenly Dragon tournament in Wuhan. But the idea of pairing up, especially with someone she despised, filled her with resistance as she refused outright despite the risk of offending a powerful clan. And while her internal conflict grew, the reality of the Jianghu around her revealed itself to be far from the honorable world she once admired, as deception, violence, and hidden schemes thrived beneath its surface, making her question everything she believed in, until she encountered a strange man whose calm yet unsettling presence contrasted sharply with his carefree behavior, who spoke as if he knew the truth behind the Great War and dismissed the entire Jianghu as nothing more than a hollow facade. Yet despite his lazy attitude and shameless personality, his words carried a weight that hinted at something deeper. And as the city of Wuhan filled with excitement for the upcoming tournaments, drawing countless warriors and rising talents from across the land, fate continued to intertwine their paths, leading to an unexpected encounter inside a crowded inn where coincidence forced them into the same space, turning curiosity into suspicion. And just as the atmosphere began to settle, the arrival of a familiar and unwelcome figure, Jianghu, shattered the fragile calm, his presence immediately igniting tension and signaling that the conflicts Trian tried to avoid were already closing in around her, pulling her deeper into a storm she could no longer escape. Tension quietly thickened as a coin was tossed onto the table, meant to pay for the meal and dismiss the man sitting there, yet he casually remarked that it wasn't enough since more food was still on the way, which immediately provoked irritation as arrogance clashed with arrogance. And in an attempt to assert dominance, the challenger reached for the massive weapon resting nearby, only to realize that the blade was far heavier than it appeared, refusing to budge despite all his strength, forcing him to pour in his internal energy just to lift it slightly, exhausting himself in the process while the man simply watched, amused, before effortlessly handling the same weapon as if it weighed nothing, turning the situation into silent humiliation that only deepened the hostility until the girl stepped in to stop the conflict, preventing the inn from becoming a battlefield. However, the tension did not disappear, as the discussion shifted toward the Dragon and Phoenix tournament, where she firmly rejected the idea of partnering with Jianghu, calling out the shameful attempt to force her through power. And when questioned about her chosen partner, the strange man calmly declared himself, standing beside her without hesitation, which only escalated the situation further as he spoke about how people react to the unknown, exposing the contradiction in dismissing something while fearing it at the same time, his words irritating yet unsettlingly precise, before the encounter finally ended with veiled threats and promises to meet again at the tournament, leaving behind unease and consequences that quickly began to ripple outward. Rumors spread. Laird and Jianghu's wounded pride turned into fury, while within the righteous sword sect, concern grew as Cherian's decision was revealed, forcing her to return and introduce the man who casually identified himself as Li Jian, speaking in an oddly carefree manner that only made him seem more suspicious, especially when he claimed to have no sect and described his parents as simple fruit sellers. Despite carrying both a blade and a sword and admitting to mastering both, something considered improper and low-level by traditional standards, yet his confidence never wavered, leaving the family uncertain whether he was a fool or something far more dangerous. That night, unable to sleep, Trian found him in the garden where his tone shifted between light-hearted and unsettling as he spoke of having things to take care of, casually mentioning sending people off as if it were nothing, hinting at a darker side beneath his strange personality, while also revealing fragments about his parents, particularly a strict father who opposed his involvement in the Jianghu, though his actions suggested he had already stepped far beyond those boundaries. Soon after, his path led him into a shadowy place known as the Dark Hub, a wandering market filled with danger, where even seasoned individuals tread carefully. Yet he entered without hesitation, confronting those within as if he belonged there, and when challenged, he responded not with fear but with overwhelming force, defeating attackers effortlessly with his bare hands, shocking onlookers who quickly realized they were witnessing someone far beyond ordinary. And as the situation escalated, he revealed his true intent, declaring that this moment marked the beginning of his path forward, abandoning any restraint he once had as he eliminated everyone who stood in his way, moving through the place with terrifying efficiency until he reached the one known as the Gluttonous Emperor, the leader of the Dark Hub, a figure of immense influence and power who initially mocked him, only to be stunned when a massive sum of money was presented without hesitation, turning the encounter into a transaction rather than a confrontation, though greed and suspicion quickly twisted the situation as threats emerged, leading to an attempted ambush using illusionary techniques designed to paralyze the mind. Yet those tricks proved useless against him as he instantly saw through and destroyed them, freeing those who had been trapped and urging them to leave, even giving them the money to start anew, an act that contrasted sharply with the brutality he displayed moments earlier, leaving even his enemies shaken by the contradiction. Angered and humiliated, the gluttonous emperor attacked with full force, but the gap in strength was absolute as the man dismantled him piece by piece, effortlessly countering his techniques, severing limbs with precision, and ultimately ending his life in a single decisive strike, declaring the act not as necessity but as intent, revealing that he had needed a reason to kill him, a statement that carried a chilling weight as he then turned his attention to another figure hidden within the chaos, calling out a name long forgotten, Huomachun, the former master of Mount Tai's Phantom Manor, exposing his identity and past, a genius of formations and engineering who had once lived with everything before losing it all in a tragic accident involving his own creation, an incident that destroyed his family and forced him into hiding, burdened by guilt and regret for years. And as the truth resurfaced, it became clear that this encounter was not but something carefully planned, the culmination of a long search that had finally come to an end, bringing together two individuals shaped by the harsh realities of the Jianghu, where ideals had long since crumbled and only power, choices, and consequences remained. At the quiet edge of the confrontation, disbelief lingered as the truth of transformation surfaced, something thought to be irreversible now standing undone, leaving even seasoned individuals shaken. Yet gratitude was quickly twisted into purpose as the man made it clear that this was not an act of kindness but the beginning of something far more demanding, binding Huomachun to a new path under his command while placing him under the guidance of Muyang, a loyal guard whose presence alone hinted at the scale of what was to come. And with that, the plans shifted abruptly, no longer vague or distant but now focused directly on the Yangjing clan, a decision that seemed reckless to outsiders yet carried a calculated intent. While elsewhere, tensions continued to rise as rumors of Jiang and Jil's rampage spread and attempts were made to ease the growing conflict, only for pride, politics, and hidden agendas to intertwine further through chance encounters and forced hospitality, leading to a situation where deception revealed itself in the most unexpected way, when a seemingly ordinary winehouse turned out to be a place of fraud and hidden danger, its prized drink nothing more than a carefully disguised imitation created through grotesque means, a truth exposed without hesitation as the man shattered both illusion and reputation in front of powerful figures, earning recognition from one of the most influential leaders in the Jianghu, whose interest in him revealed that his presence was no longer something that could be ignored, as curiosity turned into attention and attention into quiet anticipation, while beneath all of this, something far more dangerous began to unfold in the shadows as whispers of a hidden organization surfaced, one that sought to manipulate the very tournaments drawing the world's attention, using deception, infiltration, and calculated killings to ensure their plans remained undiscovered, silencing anyone who came too close to the truth. And as this unseen threat tightened its grip, the stage was unknowingly set for chaos, with warriors gathering, alliances shifting, and ambitions colliding, until the tension finally erupted once more when a direct confrontation became unavoidable, forcing Cherian to face the harsh reality of the Jianghu not as an observer but as a participant, standing before an opponent whose experience and killing intent far surpassed her own, a man who had abandoned ideals long ago and embraced survival through brutality, leaving her no room for hesitation as the weight of her inexperience pressed down on her, her thoughts racing between fear and resolve, realizing that this was no longer about pride, family, or tournaments but about survival itself. And in that decisive moment, with death standing just within reach, she made her choice, drawing her sword not as a symbol of ambition but as a necessity, stepping forward into her first true battle, knowing that once she crossed that line, there would be no turning back. The moment the clash began, the gap between life and death narrowed instantly as the opponent declared his intent, moving with terrifying speed that forced Cherian to rely on her footwork. Yet even that faltered as her attacks failed to land with any real effect, her movements sharp but ineffective, her fear growing with every exchange as the reality of a real battle crushed the confidence she once had in training, until a voice cut through her panic, telling her to abandon her dependence on footwork and instead become one with her sword, to let the blade lead and her body follow, a concept that contradicted everything she had practiced for years. Yet in that desperate moment, with nothing left to lose, she chose to trust it, shifting technique from frantic speed to something slower, heavier, and more fluid. And for the first time, her strike connected, cutting through her opponent's hair and forcing him to react, anger replacing his earlier confidence as the fight escalated, only for it to end abruptly as Jiok intervened, appearing behind him with Cherian in his grasp through an impossible movement known as the Void Step, a technique beyond her understanding, before overwhelming the opponent completely with a single decisive strike that shattered both his body and spirit, revealing a level of power that made everything before seem insignificant. And even as the man begged for his life, Jiok spoke calmly about the difference between his father's ideals and his mother's way of living, ultimately choosing the latter without hesitation, unleashing a terrifying force through his sealed blade that tore the man apart in an instant, leaving behind silence, broken only by the realization that a life had been taken, something Cherian struggled to accept as the weight of it settled in, her hands trembling as she tried to process what had just happened, while Jiok dismissed it as inevitable, reminding her that drawing a sword without the resolve to kill was an insult to the blade itself, a statement that clashed with his earlier behavior yet carried undeniable truth, marking a turning point not just in the battle but in her understanding of the Jianghu, as he declared that everything so far had only been the beginning, his ambitions stretching far beyond tournaments towards something much greater. Meanwhile, elsewhere, conversations from the past resurfaced among those who had once known his father, recalling encounters filled with tension and mystery, hinting at a legacy far deeper than what he revealed, while in the present, disbelief spread among his enemies as reports confirmed his survival and the disappearance of those sent after him, shaking their confidence and forcing them to reconsider what kind of opponent they were truly dealing with, though pride still blinded them to the truth as they chose to wait for the tournament to test it themselves. Soon the long-awaited event began, drawing countless talents from across the Jianghu as renowned figures made their appearances, each carrying expectations, reputations, and ambitions, turning the arena into a stage where power and prestige would collide. Yet even among these rising stars, Jiok stood out not through recognition but through his complete lack of concern, casually observing everything with amusement while others focused on the competition ahead. And as the participants entered the first stage, what seemed like a simple waiting area revealed itself to be a hidden test, one that had already begun the moment they stepped inside, challenging not their strength but their awareness, forcing them to uncover the truth hidden within a painting that most dismissed as meaningless, until Jiok identified the subtle detail others overlooked, leading them to the true path forward, while those who blindly followed rules without question were left behind, exposing the harsh reality that in the Jianghu survival depended not on obedience but on perception,